80 media members predict Lane Kiffin's next head coaching job. We'll tell you what they said. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. And thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network on the face of planet Earth. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers bet just $5. If your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the app today. We had a lot to delve into as Kiffin Watch 2025 rolls along. I do want to get to an update on Brian Kelly's buyout and what that means about Kiffin. Latest comments from both Lincoln Riley and Eli Drinkwitz about this hiring cycle and what that means about Lane Kiffin. We're getting to that in just a smidge. But you might have seen that on Wednesday, Brett McMurphy, who is formerly of ESPN, then the Action Network, now with On3, really good national college football writer and reporter. Most people deem Brett McMurphy to be very credible. He published a piece over at On3 where he asked 80 media members that cover college football their opinion on where Lane Kiffin will be coaching in 2026. Now, there were some throwaway votes. Scott Van Pelt said, quote, no clue. So that was one no clue. Two people said the Tennessee Titans. One of them was Tom Fornelli of CBS. The other was Trey Wallace of Outkick. And one poor soul said Alabama. That was Stephen Godfrey of Phantom Island. I kind of feel like looking at that. It's almost like every year when we go to SEC football media days and the media is asked to predict the preseason all-conference team and the projected order of finish and the conference champion. And there's some slug every year who picks Vanderbilt to win the SEC, basically invalidating the entire exercise because it's not serious, but this dork continues to do it year after year, and the league keeps giving this dork a vote, whoever that dork is. But then again, the preseason media poll doesn't matter a lick. I picked LSU in Texas to play for the SEC championship, and I was dead wrong, so what do any of us know? Anyway. What was interesting, however, is that the other, 77 votes were very telling. There were only 5 media members that picked Florida. Now, I want you to understand also that I'm not just talking about Joe from the Go Gators podcast. These are legitimate national, most of them national media members. The 5 that picked Florida, Matt Berry of ESPN, Mike Bianchi of the Orlando Sentinel, covers Florida, Chris Doering of the SEC Network, played at Florida, who, by the way, went on Twitter and said, can I recast my vote? Keith Niebuhr, On3 Gators Online, covers Florida. And the only other one that picked the Gators was Matt Humans of VSiN. So clearly Matt not plugged in. That leaves 72 votes. 72 votes. I'm sorry. 59, 69, 76 votes. Sorry. Not good at math. 76 votes. 59 said Lane Kiffin will end up at LSU. 17 said Ole Miss. Listen, there is this sentiment among some Florida fans that the notion that Florida is a distant third or out of it or has moved on is some creation by people like me. I'm only reporting to you what I know. And 2.5 weeks ago, I would have told you Lane Kiffin's going to Florida, like a lot of these people. But what they have failed to do is recognize how this news cycle has changed. And it changed the Thursday, 2 Thursdays ago, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, when every Florida person thought, done deal. You started to see that a lot, done deal. And I sat here, by the way, on this show that Sunday. And by the way, I said this was the Sunday before Layla Kiffin visited Baton Rouge. I said this: Lane Kiffin to Florida is far from a done deal. And Lane Kiffin to LSU is very, very, very much in play. That was me 2 weeks ago. So I keep telling you that Florida fans, local media, whatever, are 10 to 14 days behind the news cycle. That's why. Because they are living in a world before the week when Layla Kiffin visited Baton Rouge, because this whole thing changed then. Lane Kiffin was going to be the Florida coach before that. And then LSU got serious. And Layla Kiffin visited Baton Rouge, and that whole week, everything started trending toward Baton Rouge. And by the end of last week, Lane Kiffin to LSU was a darn near certainty. And Florida is running a distant third in this race. You don't take my word for it. 80 media members voted. Here's the ones that picked LSU: Andrea Adelson of ESPN, Brooks Austin, Bill Bender of the Sporting News, Peter Burns of the SEC Network, Chris Childers, Cole Kublik, Ross Dellinger of Yahoo, Shea Dixon, Scott I don't know him from The Athletic. Good luck. Dennis Dodd, credible. Dusty Dvorak, Bud Elliott, Chris Felica, The Bear, Bruce Feldman, Paul Feinbaum, who thought at one point it was Florida, now has picked LSU. Brian Fisher from SI, Pete Futak, College Football News, Pat Forty of SI, Stephen Greenberg of the Chicago Sun-Times, David Hale from ESPN, Matt Hayes, Kirk Herbstreit, Desmond Howard, can't say that name, Gus Johnson, Big Cat from Barstool, Joel Klatt, Sam Kahn, Joey Kanish, big old Mr. Kanish, Matt Leinart, Tom Luganbill, Stuart Mandel, Greg McElroy. Heard of some of these people? Matt Millen, Tim Vurry, Pete Nakos, credible, Rick Neuheisel, Kevin DeGandhi, Josh Pate, good dude, Chip Patterson, J.D. Piquel, Brad Powers, Brady Quinn, Scott Rabelais, the Advocate, Steve Richardson from the Football Writers Association of America, Adam Rittenberg, Dave Ross, Ralph Russo of The Athletic. You want me to keep going? Andy Staples, Phil Steele, Paul Stone, Jenny Taft, Clay Travis, Jake Trotter, Andre Ware, Ari Wasserman, Dan Wetzel, Colin Wilson, Adam Zucker. They're all picking Lane Kiffin to LSU. This isn't some Baton Rouge media creation. This is how this has trended over the last week and a half. There was a point in this process when Lane Kiffin was a heavy favorite to Florida. I might submit he had even told them he was going to be their coach. It wouldn't surprise me a lick if that came out. But as I have said throughout this entire process, every time I've opened this or any microphone, the thing I have said over and over and over and over again is it's never over until you have ink dry on a binding agreement and a coach standing at a podium. Even sometimes then it's not over. And if you rewind the clock 14, 20 days, I would have said, yes, Lane Kiffin's going to be the Florida coach. But it changed. LSU got heavily involved. People that Lane Kiffin trusts told him LSU is the better job. Take LSU. LSU made the money work, the contract work, all of it. And now LSU is in the lead for Lane Kiffin. And the most complicating factor has been the timing, which we will talk about in a bit, by the way. However, there was another piece of circumstantial evidence that played out on Wednesday that leads you to believe even further that this deal is going to get across the finish line. I'll tell you what it is next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game, you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So there was another bit of news on Wednesday that I think is even further illustrative of where LSU is heading. Ross Dellinger of Yahoo was the first to get a hold of a letter from LSU to Brian Kelly's attorneys acknowledging that LSU is firing Brian Kelly, formally terminating him without cause, and that they will, in fact, pay his $54 million buyout. Now, Brian Kelly has mitigation in there where he's got to go actively look for a job, and he has to prove to LSU that he is seeking employment and all that sort of stuff, whatever. But the bottom line is this. If you are about to get a deal done with a new coach, and there's a loose end that's untied, you need to hurriedly tie that loose end so you can move forward. I'll point it out this way. And I gave you this example before, but it might be more relevant now. When LSU fired Les Miles, they owed him a big buyout. And Les was on the sideline for a few seasons until he got back into coaching at Kansas. Well, he was collecting his buyout. But then when he wanted to go work at Kansas, he was more eager and motivated to negotiate a buyout of the remainder of that contract so that he could go coach at Kansas. And so Les, who was still owed, I believe, $6 million on his buyout, on his contract at LSU, settled for 1.4, 1.6 in that neighborhood so that he could move on and go coach. Think of it in anything in life. Like, if this unfortunately happens a lot, but people get divorced. And maybe one party wants to get married to their new significant other. Well, sometimes you got to tie up loose ends in your former relationship. So maybe that means conceding, okay, look, you can have the house, just let me go so I can go get married to my new partner. Whatever. I'm not trying to be dismissive of it, but I think you can understand what I'm saying. Maybe it's a bad example. But the point being, there's times in life when you're ready to move on to something, but there's something holding you back from that thing. You're willing to concede more to be done with that deal. That's where LSU is. LSU's on the brink of hiring Lane Kiffin. And they have this albatross hanging around their neck with the Brian Kelly buyout. And you better believe, for all the talk from the LSU perspective throughout this process about how the Brian Kelly deal wasn't going to hurt them in their ability to hire a new coach, or not having a president or AD in place wasn't going to hurt them because we're LSU, it's baloney. Yeah, LSU's a great job. But literally every great job could have its drawbacks. If you don't know who you're going to work for, if you have a governor that's going to meddle and overreach, if you don't know who the athletic director is that you're working for, if you sign a contract and this administration isn't going to honor the terms of that contract, what makes you think they would be willing to honor the terms of your deal? So all that to say, the terms of Lane Kiffin's deal leaked on Friday. I don't think that was by accident. Now, I think there's some people at LSU that were not happy it leaked. But terms of that deal leaked to Ross Dellinger, who reported them. And it's no secret whatsoever that Jimmy Sexton represents Lane Kiffin. He wants the best deal for his client. He's not going to let his client sign a contract that he doesn't think is going to be honored. So LSU stepping up and saying, you know what? Here, take the $54 million. Promise us, though, contractually, you got to be looking for a job to offset this. You can't just sit back for 6 years and collect dough. You got to be looking for a job. Okay, you do that, we'll agree to pay you. Okay. And so you move on, and it's where they are. And one of the big knocks on LSU, and I've heard this from people at Ole Miss, is that they couldn't afford the deal they offered Lane Kiffin. That's been one of the knocks. Oh, really? LSU is offering Lane Kiffin 6 years or 7 years, $90 million, and they can't even afford to buy out their old coach? How are they going to pay this one and pay off the old coach? That's been one of the things that you would poison the water with to try to create seeds of doubt for Lane Kiffin. How do you overcome that? BK, here's your $54 million. Lane, you ready? Okay. It's only further evidence of what LSU is putting in place. It's further evidence that LSU is singularly focused on Lane Kiffin. And if for all the people that have said smokescreen, distraction, troll job, all that stuff, no. This is real. They're all in on Lane Kiffin. All chips to the middle. Now, that don't mean you're going to get this thing across the finish line. But LSU is doing everything they can to eliminate any potential objection and get this thing across the finish line this weekend so that Lane Kiffin is in Baton Rouge on Monday. We'll see if they can get it there. I'll continue to say it. I've said it on every show. I'm going to say it again. Until the ink is dry and the coach is at the podium, it ain't done. But you had 80 media members with 59 of them picking objective national people who know this sport, picking Lane Kiffin to Baton Rouge. You've got contract terms leaked. You've got the BK buyout done at this point. Everything is showing you where this is headed. All they need is for Ole Miss to get through the Egg Bowl and Lane Kiffin to sign a contract with LSU and be the next coach and be here on Monday. See if they can get there. Now, there's a couple of other scenarios floating out there that could impact how the timing of this works. They involve Lincoln Riley, Eli Drinkwitz, yes, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. We'll get into all that as we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. Yes, indeed. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift. And Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. My goodness gracious, y'all. Who doesn't love Omaha Steaks? Whether you're treating yourself this season or you're sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. The quality is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting on weeknights cooking even easier. So save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. So, as we have gone through this entire process involving LSU's search for a new coach, every time there has been a coach who has said anything on the record about the coaching carousel, we've shared it with you. From Dan Lanning on the Rich Eisen show. Remember this?
Yeah, I'm not leaving Oregon. Yeah, as long as I win. That's what I always tell my kids. Yeah. Right? If your dad wins, we'll be at Oregon. So I gotta win. Right? That's how it changes.
Dan Lanning, no uncertain terms, not leaving. Eli Drinkwitz weeks ago said this.
I'm not going to comment on message board chatters, tweets, sources. I've maintained with you and our team that my complete focus is on the task at hand. Last week, people were tired of me because I couldn't win the big game. People had me meeting with my team and telling them that I was going to another school, none of which were true. All of this stuff is just a distraction. I would like to remind everybody, including our fans, we absolutely love Mizzou. We love what we're building. We've been to 6 straight bowl games. We've got the sellout streak going. Our administration has been nothing but phenomenal to me. Since I've been here, I've signed multiple.
That's enough. Point being, Dan Lanning, I ain't leaving. Eli Drinkwitz, nothing but a distraction. I love Mizzou. Wouldn't say it. Not going to comment on it. You have a denial. You have a non-denial denial. Well, enter Southern Cal coach Lincoln Riley, who's been rumored to maybe not love it out there on the West Coast and could even be a target potentially for the Gators. Lincoln Riley was asked about it. See which one this more pairs with, Dan Lanning or Eli Drinkwitz.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, like I said before, I'm right where I'm supposed to be. So, yeah, I think nothing other than what we're building, literally. I love being here. And, yeah, that's really the end of it.
By the way, the question was, do you expect to be the coach at USC in 2026?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
That falls in line with what Dan Lanning said. That is a denial, a hard and fast denial. Yeah, I'm going to be here. Why wouldn't I be here? I love it here. I'm not going anywhere. Eli Drinkwitz's comments are a big difference. Now, I also want to point out that Drinkwitz has been linked to LSU, to Florida, to Ole Miss, to everywhere. And Drinkwitz very much at this point feels like a bridesmaid. He's everybody's number 2, but nobody really wants him. And my feeling on Drinkwitz is he's a good coach. He won at App State. He's done a really good job at Missouri. He has elevated their program. However, it's a very natural question of a cost-benefit analysis. Eli Drinkwitz is making $9 million at Missouri. He's got escalators that'll take him to 9.25 and 9.5 through 2029. If someone wants to hire Eli Drinkwitz away from Missouri, they're going to have to pay him $10, $11 million a year. Are you really willing to pay Eli Drinkwitz $10, $11 million a year? That's the question. And there are times in life where there's things you love, things you want, you just don't want it at that price. Like, I've given this example before. I like sport coats. I like to have a nice sport coat. And I'll wear jeans, a dress shirt, and I'll throw a nice sport coat on. That's where I'll spend money on attire, sport coats. I have several very nice cashmere jackets. They're gorgeous. Love them. They fit great. They feel great. They're awesome. You may look at that and go, $1,500 for a jacket? It looks nice. It's gorgeous. I would love to wear that. That's really nice. But I can go buy that one for $250, and it doesn't really matter that much to me. Okay, that's fine. That's your prerogative. And I think that's where this is with Eli Drinkwitz. Like, Eli Drinkwitz is going to cost a team 10, 11, 12 million bucks a year when nobody thinks he's worth 10, 11, 12 million bucks a year. So that's the issue. They've priced themselves out of the market. Eli Drinkwitz has priced himself out of the market for a lot of jobs. And Missouri has an extension, reportedly, the Missouri Board of Curators has put an extension on the table for another 6 years for Eli Drinkwitz. They're pumped. They're somewhat relevant. So Drink might be everybody's number 2. LSU, Florida, Ole Miss, Penn State, lots of places, but nobody has him as their number 1 at this point. The other thing that's worth noting is, as we look at this timeline, College Football Playoff Selection Committee did their stupid rankings, which I hate and I never watch. But Hunter Yurachek, who's the committee chairman, was asked about Ole Miss. So Ole Miss didn't play, but they dropped the spot. They flipped with Oregon. Ole Miss went from 6 to 7. Oregon went from 7 to 6. And this is Hunter Yurachek on a back and forth with Reese Davis about Ole Miss and the possibility of Lane Kiffin not being there. Give a listen.
It is in the protocol, but I'm not sure we will have a data point to use that as part of the protocol.
What do you mean by that? That you won't have a data, meaning that you don't know what's going to happen with the coaching situation, or you will not have seen the team play without the coach?
Correct.
Which is correct? The latter?
We will not have seen the team play without. Yes, we would not have seen the team play without a coach.
Part of the reason why many Ole Miss people wanted Lane Kiffin gone this week. So Joe Judge could coach them in the Egg Bowl, they win, and they could say to the committee, see, we can win without Lane Kiffin. Now they're not going to have that opportunity. Now they win that game, they're going to be in the college football playoff at 11-1, with or without Lane Kiffin. Lose that game and Kiffin leaves, they don't have a data point. And you could see Ole Miss out of the college football playoff. You're an LSU fan, you want Lane Kiffin, this is easy. Ring them cowbells on Friday morning. Pull hard for Mississippi State. Because if Ole Miss loses that game and they're out of the playoff, it makes Lane Kiffin's decision and timing even easier. And then I think Saturday, you're getting an announcement that Lane Kiffin's going to be the LSU coach. If all that plays out. It gets very complex. If you start to see some upsets and an Ole Miss win, and Ole Miss ends up in the SEC championship game. Not likely, but not impossible. Of course, as it transpires, we'll follow it right here on Locked on LSU. So subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review, subscribe on YouTube, and let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked on LSU. It's your team every day.